You can work 40 years on a job, give your best effort, show up on time every day, and still end up broke. That's the truth nobody tells you. And if you don't learn the difference between making a living and building a fortune, you'll trade your life for a paycheck and retire with regret. In this video, I'm going to show you why working hard on your job will never make you rich and what you must do instead. You'll learn the real reason effort alone doesn't pay, how the marketplace actually rewards value, and why wealth is built not by hours, but by self-development, skills, and philosophy. If you've ever wondered why your hard work isn't translating into the life you want, this will give you the answer. And by the end, you'll not only understand the rule, you'll know how to apply it so you can escape the trap of trading your life for wages. I know what it feels like to work hard and still come up short. I used to put in the hours, thinking the company would reward me just for trying. But month after month, year after year, I realized I was running in place. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've worked overtime, sacrificed weekends, and still wondered why the numbers don't add up. And here's the truth. It's not your effort that's broken, it's your philosophy. Because wealth is not built by clocking more hours. Wealth is built by becoming more valuable. That's the rule most people never hear. And it's why they work their whole lives only to retire broke. But if you'll learn this rule, you can break free of that cycle. So here's what we're going to do. First, I'll tell you the story of how I discovered this truth. The day I realized more hours on the job would never give me the life I wanted. Then, I'll show you the difference between working hard on your job and working hard on yourself. After that, we'll break down the marketplace principle that explains why value determines income, not time. Finally, I'll give you the exact disciplines that took me from broke at 25 to financially independent by 31. And along the way, I'll share some surprises. Because the path to wealth is often the opposite of what most people believe. If you'll stay with me, you may find that this one idea becomes the turning point that changes your financial destiny forever. Here's something most people completely miss. And I know this because I missed it for years myself. You can work harder and harder at your job. You can give it more hours, more sweat, more of your energy in your life, and still never get ahead. That's the trap. A job can make you a living, but it will never make you rich. And if you don't learn that distinction, you'll spend your best years trading your time for wages, only to wake up at the end with too little stored, too little freedom, and too many regrets. I used to believe the answer was more effort. If 8 hours didn't do it, maybe 10 hours would. If 10 hours wasn't enough, I'd try 12. I was sincere, I was diligent, I was committed. But I was also broke. And one day my mentor helped me see why. The company was paying me for the role I filled, not for the person I could become. My potential didn't matter to them. My hours were all they wanted. And the truth is, a job is designed to pay you just enough to keep you coming back. It will never pay you enough to set you free. That was a bitter pill to swallow. But it was also the moment my eyes opened. Think about it. If working harder on the job was the secret, then every laborer, every employee, every worker who gave more hours would be wealthy. But they're not. In fact, most of the hardest working people are also the ones struggling the most. Why? Because the system isn't designed to reward effort, it's designed to reward value. And effort alone doesn't create value in the eyes of the marketplace. You can work until your hands bleed, and the company will still give you what they believe the role is worth. That's it. That's the trap, thinking more hours equals more future, when really, more hours only equals more exhaustion. I'll never forget the day a little Girl Scout came to my door selling cookies. They were just $2 a box. And I wanted to buy them. I wanted to help her. But I didn't have the money, not $200, not $22. And I lied to her. I told her we've already got all the cookies we need. When I closed the door, I leaned against it and thought, what kind of story am I living where I have to lie to a Girl Scout because I don't have $2? That was my reality. I was working hard, showing up, doing my best, and I was broke. That's when it hit me. Effort on the job alone would never change my future. And that's where the image comes in. Slaves until the grave. Because if you don't break out of this trap, that's exactly what happens. You trade your freedom for a paycheck. Day after day. Week after week, year after year, until suddenly the years are gone and you've got nothing to show but worn out hands and a tired spirit. And the cruel part is, you were sincere the whole time. You meant well. You worked hard. But you worked hard on the wrong thing. So let me put it plainly. Hard work on your job will make you a living. Hard work on yourself will make you a fortune. And that's the shift. That's the key. That's the difference between being trapped in wages and being free in wealth. But until you see the trap, you'll never escape it. And that leads us to the next step. If hard work on the job doesn't create wealth, then what does? If wages can never set you free, then where does freedom come from? And the answer, my friend, is understanding the difference between wages and wealth. That's the secret I want to share with you next. Here's the part most people never stop long enough to think about. A wage is nothing more than a price placed on your time. And here's the problem with that. Someone else sets the price. The company, the boss, the system. They decide what that hour's worth to them, not what your life is worth to you. And that means no matter how hard you work, no matter how many hours you give, you're still trapped inside the ceiling someone else has built. A wage is a cage. It may keep food on the table, but it will never set you free. I used to think I was climbing the ladder. Show up on time, work hard, stay late, and eventually they'll reward me, right? Eventually they'll see my effort and raise my pay. But the truth is, wages don't rise with effort. Wages rise with leverage, with value, with negotiation, with things that often have nothing to do with how much you sweat. And when I finally realized that, I saw the trap clearly. If all I do is give more hours, I'll just wear myself out faster without ever changing my future. More hours doesn't mean more wealth. More effort doesn't mean more freedom. It only means more exhaustion, and maybe you felt that too. You work overtime, you sacrifice weekends, you take on more tasks, but when payday comes, it still feels like barely enough. You think, surely if I give more, they'll give more. But the company doesn't pay for effort, it pays for results. And the marketplace doesn't measure your sweat, it measures your value. That's why two people can work the same hours, in the same building, under the same roof, and one earns 10 times what the other earns. Not because one worked harder, but because one brought more value. And until you understand that distinction, you'll keep believing the lie that effort equals wealth. It doesn't. Now let me tell you something my mentor once said to me, and it stopped me in my tracks. He said, Jim, your paycheck is not your future. Your paycheck is only your present. Your philosophy is your future. And I didn't understand it first. I thought money was about the job. I thought the job was my future. But he explained that as long as you depend on wages alone, your future will always be limited. Because wages are someone else's measurement of your worth in that role. But philosophy, the way you think, the way you grow, the way you develop yourself, that's what shapes your value in the marketplace. And that value has no ceiling. Let me give you a picture. Imagine two men earning the same paycheck. They both work 40 hours a week. They both receive the same amount at the end of the month. But one spends every penny. He says, I worked hard, I deserve this. He buys comforts, he wastes, he consumes. The other takes a portion and invests. He learns, he studies, he applies, disciplines to his money. 10 years later, one is broke, one is wealthy. Same wages, same hours, different philosophy. That's the point. The problem isn't the wage. The problem is believing the wage is your future. And this is why millions retire broke after a lifetime of labor. They never broke free from wage thinking. They believed that if they just worked hard enough, long enough, sincerely enough, they'd arrive at wealth. But sincerity doesn't pay. Hard work alone doesn't pay. Only value pays. And if you don't learn to multiply value, you'll stay stuck at the level of wages. That's the harsh truth, but it's also the liberating truth. Because once you see the limits of wages, you can stop expecting them to make you rich and start asking what actually will. So let me pose the question to you. If wages won't make you wealthy, then what will? If more hours won't set you free, then what's the path? The answer, friend, is learning the secret of wealth. And it isn't about time, it's about value. And that's what we'll explore next. Now here's the turning point, the place where my mentor shifted my thinking forever. He said, Jim, wealth is not built by trading time. Wealth is built by multiplying value. And I'll tell you, when I first heard that, it sounded too simple. For years, I had been convinced that if I could just put in more effort, clock more hours, push harder, then surely the results would come. But I was confusing movement with progress. I was confusing hours with wealth. And then the truth hit me. The marketplace doesn't reward effort, it rewards value. You can work 12 hours digging ditches and barely scrape by. Another man can sit for 1 hour with the right knowledge, the right skills, the right leverage, and earn more than you will in a month. The difference is not in effort, the difference is in value. That's why my mentor told me, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Because your job may give you a wage, but working on yourself will give you a fortune. The job pays for what you are today, but wealth comes from who you are becoming. And when I understood that, everything changed. I stopped trying to squeeze a future out of wages and started building a future out of self-development. That shift in philosophy was worth more than any overtime I could have worked. Think about it. Two men can earn the same paycheck. One takes that money, spends it all, and 10 years later has nothing to show. The other takes the same amount, studies investing, learns about business, disciplines himself to save, and 10 years later he has multiplied his income tenfold. Same job, same hours, same wages, different philosophy, different value, different destiny. The difference wasn't in the hours, it was in how much they grew beyond the hours. Let me give you another example. A person making $5 an hour and another making $500 an hour. Both work 60 minutes. Both have only 60 minutes in a day. But one is bringing skills, ideas, knowledge, and value that are rare, specialized, and needed. The other is bringing something common, something replaceable. The hours are the same. The effort might even be similar. But the value is worlds apart. That's why one is wealthy and one is stuck. So the question you've got to ask yourself is not, how can I work more hours? But, how can I raise my value so the hours I give are worth more to the marketplace? Because the secret to wealth isn't in working harder, it's in becoming more. And once you grasp that, you'll stop waiting for the boss to change, or for the company to pay you more, or for the government to fix the economy. You'll realize that none of those things control your wealth. The only thing that controls it is your growth, your skills, your philosophy, your ability to create value. And friend, let me tell you, that's the most liberating truth you can ever learn. Because it means you're not trapped by your wages. You're not doomed by your job. You're not stuck because of your background or your education or your luck. You can change everything if you'll change yourself. You can multiply your value, and when you do, the marketplace will reward you in proportion. It may not be overnight, but it will be inevitable, because the marketplace always pays for value. So let's take the next step. If wealth comes from value, and value comes from becoming more, then the question is, how do you actually raise your value? What's the principle that explains how the marketplace decides what you're worth? That's what we'll uncover next. Here's something you've got to settle in your mind once and for all. The marketplace is the final judge. Not your boss, not your friends, not your intentions, not even your effort. The marketplace decides what you're worth. And the marketplace has only one rule. It pays for value. Not for time, not for sweat, not for sincerity, for value. And when you really let that sink in, it changes the way you look at your job, your income, and your future. Because suddenly you realize that the only way to earn more, to be more, to have more, is to become more valuable. Now let me illustrate. Person makes $5 an hour, another makes $50, another makes $500. Did the hours change? No. Did the day grow longer for one and shorter for the other? No. They each had the same 24 hours, the same 60 minutes in an hour. The difference wasn't in the hours. The difference was in the value they brought to those hours. One brought common skills, the other brought rare skills. One brought what anyone could do, the other brought what few could do. And the marketplace rewarded accordingly. That's why you'll find people working just as hard, sweating just as much, and yet living in completely different worlds financially. The difference is not effort, it's value. This is why my mentor told me, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills. Don't wish for less challenge, wish for more wisdom. Because if you get better, your value increases, and when your value increases, your income will follow. The marketplace can't help but respond to a person who has sharpened their skills, refined their habits, deepened their philosophy, and multiplied their usefulness. That's the law. The marketplace doesn't care who you are, it cares what you bring. And if you bring more, you'll earn more. Now this might feel unfair at first, because you look at someone making hundreds of times more than you and you think, but they don't work harder than I do. They don't put in more hours. Why should they earn more? But fairness isn't measured in hours, it's measured in value. If someone can solve a problem that few others can, if they can lead a team, design a system, create a product, teach an idea, or inspire a movement, their 1 hour is worth more to the marketplace than your 12 hours. Not because they're better as people, but because they've chosen to become more valuable in the skills they developed. And that's available to anyone if you'll make the decision to grow. Let me give you a simple picture. Imagine two carpenters. One knows how to swing a hammer, the other knows how to design an entire house. The first gets paid by the hour, the second gets paid by the project. And the project might bring in more in a day than the other makes in a year. Same field, same industry, different value. Or think of two doctors. One practices routine checkups, the other specializes in a rare surgery only a handful in the world can perform. Which one do you think the marketplace rewards more? It's not about fairness, it's about value. So here's the great news. Your value is not fixed. You can increase it. You can study. You can practice. You can add new skills. You can refine your communication. You can expand your understanding. You can discipline your habits. Every investment you make in yourself multiplies your value to the marketplace. And when your value multiplies, so will your income. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen inevitably, because the marketplace is faithful in this regard. It always pays for value. So stop asking, why don't they pay me more? And start asking, how can I become more valuable? Stop waiting for the company to notice your effort and start building yourself until the marketplace can't ignore your worth. Because when you finally take that responsibility, you break free from the trap of wages and step into the path of wealth. Now the question becomes, how do you actually do it? How do you raise your value so the marketplace rewards you more richly? And that's where we move next into the real work. The work of working harder on yourself than you do on your job. Here's something I discovered that changed the entire trajectory of my life. Formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. And don't say that to diminish the value of school. School is important. And it teaches you the basics of how to participate in society. But if you want to rise above survival, if you want to build wealth, freedom, and influence, you must go beyond what's taught in the classroom. You must take charge of your own learning, your own growth, your own personal development. Because no one is going to hand you wealth in exchange for a diploma. The marketplace doesn't reward what you've memorized. It rewards what you can do, what you can solve, and the value you can bring. And that comes from self-education. When I was 25, I was broke, embarrassed, and out of answers. I had worked hard, but I was still falling behind. And then I met my mentor, Earl Schoaf. He asked me what I was doing to work on myself. I said, I've finished school. I've done what I could. He shook his head and said, no, Jim, that's not what I mean. I mean, what are you doing every day to sharpen your mind, to deepen your philosophy, to expand your value? And I had no answer. That was the beginning of my library. That was when I began reading books, listening to recordings, attending seminars, asking better questions. And within 5 years, that decision, not a new job, not a lucky break, not winning the lottery, that decision made me a millionaire. Now, why is self-education so powerful? Because every book you read, every lesson you learn, every idea you absorb adds to your value, and the marketplace pays for value. If you study communication, suddenly you can lead teams, persuade customers, inspire people, and that makes you more valuable. If you study investing, suddenly you can multiply your money instead of just spending it, and that makes you more valuable. If you study history, philosophy, leadership, human behavior, you learn principles that apply everywhere and that gives you leverage in every field. Knowledge multiplies usefulness. And usefulness multiplies income. That's the connection most people never make. I filled my shelves with 1,000 books, biographies, classics, manuals, teachings. Every night, I associated with the best minds in history. I had conversations with Abraham Lincoln, with Marcus Aurelius, with the great thinkers and builders who left their wisdom behind in print. Those voices became my companions. They sharpened me, they challenged me, they raised my standards. And without realizing it, I was changing. My thinking expanded. My philosophy deepened. My communication improved. And the marketplace began to pay me differently because I wasn't the same man I had been before. Now let me tell you why this matters for you. Most people finish school and stop learning. They close the books, they turn off the lessons, and they spend the rest of their lives entertaining themselves instead of educating themselves. And then they wonder why their income stays the same year after year. But if you'll do the opposite, if you'll make learning a daily discipline, your value will rise, your opportunities will multiply, and your future will change. Because every day you learn, you're raising your price in the marketplace. And here's the practical part. You don't have to study for 8 hours a day. You don't need to master everything at once. Start small. Read for 30 minutes. Listen to a lecture on your commute. Take notes. Keep a journal. Write down what you've learned. Apply one idea at a time. The goal isn't to overwhelm yourself. The goal is to make learning a habit. Because habits, not occasional efforts, shape your destiny. So I'll challenge you right here. Begin your own library. Don't let the television fill your evenings. Let the books, the voices of wisdom, the lessons of history, fill them. Trade 1 hour of entertainment for 1 hour of education and watch what happens. Because in a year, you'll be a different person. And when you're different, your income will be different. Your influence will be different. Your future will be different. And once you've begun that process of self-education, the next step is to turn it into action, to transform ideas into disciplines. Because knowledge alone doesn't create wealth. It's the application, the daily practice, the consistency of discipline that makes the difference. And that's where we'll go next. Here's a truth I want you to carry with you. Knowledge is only potential power. It sits quietly on the shelf until you apply it. Ideas, even the best ones, don't pay until they become action. And the difference between the person who merely knows and the person who becomes wealthy is simple. One collects knowledge, the other practices discipline. Because wealth doesn't come from what you know. Wealth comes from what you do consistently day after day when no one is watching. Now this may sound simple, almost too simple, but let me lay it out for you. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. And failure? Failure is nothing more than a few small errors in judgment repeated every day. That's it. That's the dividing line. Not one dramatic event, not a single lucky break, not a sudden catastrophe. Just disciplines or errors compounded over time. One man chooses to read 30 minutes a day. The other chooses to watch another episode of television. One man chooses to save $10 a week. The other chooses to spend every dime. One man chooses to exercise, to practice, to sharpen himself. The other chooses to sleep in, to relax, to delay. Neither decision seems to matter today. But add it up over a year, over a decade, over a lifetime, and you'll see the staggering difference. My mentor once told me, Jim, the pain of discipline weighs ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. And I've carried that with me ever since. Discipline may sting in the moment. Waking up early is uncomfortable. Saving money when you'd rather spend it feels restrictive. Reading when you'd rather be entertained feels tedious. But each of those disciplines is light compared to the crushing burden of regret. Regret is looking back at 40 years of labor and realizing you have nothing stored up. Regret is realizing you traded your youth, your energy, your best years, and all you have is a box of excuses. That weight is unbearable. And it's a weight you don't have to carry if you'll choose the lighter weight of discipline today. Think of discipline like planting seeds. Each small action, each good habit is a seed sown into the soil of your future. And just like a farmer doesn't see the harvest the next day, you won't see immediate results. But keep planting, keep watering, keep cultivating, and the harvest is inevitable. The man who disciplines himself to invest every month doesn't see wealth overnight, but 10 years later, he's financially free. The man who disciplines himself to read and study doesn't transform in a week, but 10 years later, he's wise, skilled, and sought after. The law of sowing and reaping always works, but it only works if you sow. And excuses never sow, only discipline does. Now let's be clear. Discipline is not about perfection. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about doing something consistently. Maybe for you, it's starting with a journal. Writing down your thoughts, your lessons, your ideas every day until you've built a habit of reflection. Maybe it's setting aside 10% of every paycheck, no matter how small, until saving becomes automatic. Maybe it's trading 1 hour of entertainment for 1 hour of study each evening. Those are small disciplines, but over time, they're the difference between a life of mediocrity and a life of abundance. And here's what's beautiful. Once you've built the habit of discipline, it begins to pay in every area. The discipline of managing your money spills over into managing your time. The discipline of reading spills over into speaking more clearly, thinking more deeply, earning more respect. The discipline of health spills over into energy, focus, and productivity. Discipline is a seed that multiplies in ways you can't predict, but always in your favor. So let me ask you, what small discipline can you begin today? Not tomorrow, not someday, but today. Because every day you delay, you're practicing the opposite, the error in judgment. And every error compounds, just as every discipline does. So choose wisely. Will you carry the ounces of discipline today or the tons of regret tomorrow? Now, once you understand the power of daily disciplines, the next logical step is to design a future beyond wages, to stop living for the paycheck and start building multiple streams of value that can free you from the trap entirely. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. Now that you see the limits of wages, and now that you understand the difference between knowledge and discipline, let's talk about the great escape, breaking free from the wage trap altogether. Because here's the truth. If all you ever do is trade your hours for dollars, then your future will always be in someone else's hands. The company decides your pay. The government decides your taxes. The economy decides your security. And at the end of 40 years, after all your sweat and labor, you'll discover what millions of people find out too late. You've worked hard, you've been sincere, you've played by the rules, and yet you're still broke. Not because you were lazy, but because you were trapped inside a system designed to pay you just enough to survive, but never enough to thrive. And unless you break out of that system, you'll spend your life as what I call a slave until the grave, working endlessly with no freedom in sight. So how do you escape? You escape by building something beyond wages. You escape by creating streams of income that don't depend solely on the hours you clock. You escape by moving from employee thinking to entrepreneur thinking, from laborer thinking to owner thinking, from consumer thinking to investor thinking. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with a decision to stop relying on your paycheck as the only source of your future. Your paycheck is a seed, not a harvest. If you eat it all, you'll always be hungry. If you plant it wisely, you can build a future that frees you. Think of the law of sowing and reaping. The farmer doesn't eat all the seed. He saves some to plant, and in planting, he multiplies his future. Your paycheck works the same way. Don't consume it all. Save, invest, build, because every dollar you set aside in discipline is a seed for tomorrow's harvest. And every dollar you waste is a harvest you'll never see. That's why wealthy people don't think in terms of wages. They think in terms of value, leverage, and multiplication. They understand that one small stream today can become a river tomorrow if it's cared for. Now let me make this real for you. I knew men who worked for 40 years at the same job, faithful, steady, hard-working, and when retirement came, they had almost nothing. Why? Because they relied on wages alone. They never planted, never invested, never multiplied. They thought the company would take care of them. And then one day they woke up and realized the company's responsibility was not their wealth, it was their labor. And once the labor was gone, so was the paycheck. On the other hand, I've seen men who started small, saving a little, investing a little, building slowly, working on themselves, and over time they escaped the trap. They had businesses, investments, assets that worked for them even while they slept. That's freedom. That's wealth. That's what wages alone can never give you. So here's the choice before you. You can stay in the trap, trade hours for dollars until your body wears out, and hope someone else saves you at the end. Or you can take responsibility, use your wages as seed, invest in yourself, create multiple streams of income, and design a life beyond wages. Because the wage system will never set you free. Only you can. And here's the best part. You don't have to start big. You don't need to build an empire in a day. You start small. A few dollars saved, a few books read, a few hours each week invested in learning a new skill, building a side business, studying a new idea. Those small acts, multiplied over time, will break you free. The trap may be strong, but discipline is stronger. And if you begin today, you can escape tomorrow. So as we prepare to close, let's put all of this together. We've seen the trap of the job, the limits of wages, the principle of the marketplace, the power of self-education, the necessity of daily discipline, and the path of escaping through planting and multiplying. And now, the question is simple. Will you act or will you wait? Because waiting is just another name for wasting. And wasting leads only to regret. So let me leave you with this final challenge, and then I'll show you where to go next. So here we are, friends, standing at the end of this journey together. And I want you to pause for just a moment and take in the weight of what you've heard. Because this wasn't just another talk about money or time or work. This was about your future. This was about breaking free from a cycle that has trapped millions of sincere, hard-working people who gave their lives to a job only to discover at the end that they had traded their best years for a wage that barely sustained them and left them with nothing stored. I don't want that to be your story. I don't want you to spend 40 years believing that effort alone will someday deliver you into abundance, when in truth it never will. Because the truth is plain, your job will give you a living, but it will never make you rich. Only your personal growth, your philosophy, your disciplines, and your courage to step outside the wage trap can give you a fortune. Let's gather up the lessons. First, you saw the trap of the job, how it keeps you running but never arriving, how it pays you just enough to keep you coming back, but never enough to set you free. Then, you learned the limits of wages, how they are capped, controlled by others, and can never reflect your true potential. From there, we looked at the path to wealth, built not on hours, but on value, and how the marketplace rewards those who become more, not those who simply do more. We uncovered the marketplace principle, that your income is a direct reflection of your value, and the only way to raise one is to raise the other. We walked through the discipline of self-education, how formal schooling will give you a living, but self-education will give you a fortune, and how a library can change your life more than a paycheck ever will. Then we came to the daily disciplines that pay, the small, consistent actions that weigh ounces today, but save you tons of regret tomorrow. And finally, we saw the way of escape, how to use your wages as seed to plant, to multiply, to create streams of income that flow beyond your labor so you can step out of the cage of wages and into the freedom of wealth. So here's my challenge to you. Don't let this remain words. Don't nod your head and go back to the old routine. Tonight, take out a sheet of paper and ask yourself, what am I doing every single day to increase my value? Not how many hours did I work, not how tired did I become, not how many tasks did I finish, but what did I do to grow me? What new skill did I practice? What book did I read? What seed did I plant? What habit did I strengthen? Write it down. Because that list, not your paycheck, will decide your future. And if you find the page empty, don't despair. Just start today. Because one discipline begun today is worth more than 1,000 excuses tomorrow. I know it's easier to stay in the routine. I know it's comfortable to believe that someday the job will reward you for your loyalty. But comfort is a liar, and someday never comes. If you want wealth, you must build it. If you want freedom, you must earn it. If you want change, you must become it. That's the truth. And though it's hard, it's also liberating because it means the power is in your hands. No one else has to change for your life to change. Only you. So let me close with this invitation. If what you've heard tonight has stirred something inside you, if it has woken you up to the truth about wages and wealth, then don't stop here. Because there's another principle you must learn, one that will sharpen this lesson and take it even further. It's the difference between those who earn $5 an hour and those who earn $500. And I'll tell you this, it's not time, it's not luck, and it's not background. It's value, it's philosophy, it's what they've chosen to become. And in my next video, the surprising difference between people who earn $5 an hour and $500 an hour, I'll show you exactly what that difference is. Click here and let's keep building together. Because you were not meant to be trapped. You were not meant to spend your life as a slave until the grave. You were meant to rise, to grow, to become more, to live free, and to leave behind a legacy. And that begins the moment you decide to stop working only on your job and start working harder on yourself.